Hello and welcome to another episode of House, the Shared Living podcast, where we explore the people, projects and ideas shaping the future of shared living. I'm Deenie Lee from the Property Marketing Strategists.
And I'm Sarah Canning from the Property Marketing Strategists.
And I'm afraid we're without Dan today. He couldn't join us. But we are recording from Bristol to talk about one of the UK's most ambitious regeneration projects, Brabazon. Built on the former Filton airfield, once home to Concorde, this 400-acre site is becoming an entirely new neighbourhood. It's a development on a remarkable scale, and we visited yesterday, and it was amazing to see what is happening, and I can attest it is a remarkable scale. Over the coming years, Brabazon will deliver over 6,500 homes, purpose-built student accommodation, build-to-rent, employment space, public parks, schools, transport, infrastructure, retail, community facilities and the new YTL arena. It is effectively an entire new piece of city, and I think I was saying yesterday that I think I saw my first ever new station in this country, which I haven't seen for a very long time, so it is amazing what is happening there. But today's conversation isn't just going to be about the buildings, it's going to be about much bigger. We'll be discussing, can you deliberately create community? Can a masterplanned neighbourhood feel authentic? And could Brabazon become a blueprint for the next generation of British new towns?
So to help us answer those questions, we're delighted to welcome John McDiarmid and Seb Loyn. Jonathan, Seb, thank you for joining us. And can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and your roles within Brabazon?
So my name is Seb Loyn. I am Planning Development Director at YTL. So I've been working on the site for about 10 years, which makes me feel really old. But I have to say the progress over the last sort of 3 or 4 has just sort of accelerated, which obviously you saw yesterday. So my role effectively covers the sort of land aspects of the site, any sort of tidying up of land acquisition and things like that, taking any of the schemes that we decide to bring forward through planning, and then on the office side, securing office tenants, which is a new string to my bow, and is, a new dimension to property development that I've never had to sort of consider before. So that's been quite exciting for me personally.
And I'm John McDiarmid. I'm the Director of Sales, Marketing, Cover Asset Management and the whole customer relations, customer experience, so the operational side of what we do at Brabazon.
Thank you. And John, can we start with a brief history? And I do say brief because there's probably so much that you can say if you wanted to. It's got an incredible legacy. The Filton airfield, Concorde was built there, and it's part of Bristol's engineering story. But I think what is remarkable about it is that, yes, it's history. You're doing something to bring it forward, but actually it's still a really kind of active part of the now as well. So maybe you can cover a bit of historic on what's being kept really, because it's not a complete demolished situation.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. There's over 125 years worth of history on the airfield, and Brabazon is ultimately about living up to the legacy of that past. So you've had planes built here. You mentioned Concorde. We can't, of course, forget Brabazon itself, which is what the new project and the development is named afterwards. Very famous plane, luxury airliner. And what we are setting out to do here is embrace the aviation and the aerospace industry that sits on our doorstep, still one of the strongest parts of North Bristol's region, along with the engineering and education facilities that surround us. So we're, if you like, the new kids on the block within a huge existing community of North Bristol. And what we're trying to deliver here is a new town that embraces everything that's here at the moment, doesn't exclude, if you like, any of the existing communities, and then welcomes them in to create an even larger new community that fundamentally hasn't existed for 125 years.
I must say it was super exciting driving along the runway yesterday, John, but you didn't drive that fast, I have to say.
Yeah, well,
We didn't take off.
Being responsible for estates, I have to follow the speed limits, and the days of speed limits not existing are long gone, I'm afraid. So sorry to disappoint.
I suppose just picking up on that point around the existing communities, though, I mean, as someone who lived on Brabazon for a while as well, it's really apparent that you've got all these ingredients that create effectively a city centre, but the airfield has been this thing that's either separated those communities because it's 3.5 kilometres long, never been able to get into it, And as a result of that, in some ways, North Bristol has never really had a centre. And it was really apparent to our shareholders when they bought the site 10 years ago, and they had a very, very vanilla, suburban detached, semi-detached scheme, didn't want to do any employment, didn't want to do any retail, didn't want to do all the things that you'd expect to find in the city centre. And it was so obvious to them that actually what you needed to deliver was the opposite, this sort of high-density mixed-use place. Because, as John was saying, you've got all these ingredients that really it was just crying out for that one place where people could be pulled together and call a sort of centre.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, a huge opportunity.
Yeah, it's really unique,
for
isn't
us
it? Really unique, really difficult to find a comparable, I guess, because when you look around the country and what's happened in different parts, London's an obvious example with major regeneration projects, but there aren't many of such scale of 400 and however many acres it is now plus of brownfield sites that really should be the land that we're working on and delivering on to create these urban environments. And thankfully for us, ours is relatively central to Bristol. We're not 10, 20, 30 miles out into the middle of nowhere, if you know what I mean. And it really means that we can grow the city.
It's funny because I've done a load of strategic development sites in the past, and usually they all start with a sort of congregation, if you like, of sort of experts, inverted commas, large multidisciplinary consultant here, large one there. And there's this big greenfield site in the middle of nowhere, and they go, right, okay, what we're going to do is deliver a new urban centre. Okay, right. Well, we're going to need a railway station. Is there one there? No, there's no railway. Okay, well, that's, 40 million, 50 million, 60 million pounds. Motorways connections are going to be really important. Industry. How are we going to get industry into this place? Well, that's going to take a long time because, you need to create all the, and the list goes on. By the time you've sort of got to the end of that sort of list, you're going, should we just stick a load of suburban houses here? Actually, it doesn't work. Whereas Brabazon, you sort of look at and it's just like, hold on a second. Railway line, railway station, parkway on our doorstep that connects you into London in 75 minutes, great connections up north as well. It's just like all the ingredients are there and you're sort of like, oh, yes. Very, very unique.
But with 6,500 homes, you couldn't just do homes. It would never have worked. I mean, having said that, there are many developments, probably not to that scale, that do just do homes. But without that, like you said, that kind of that central, that place to work, to live, to meet, to learn, all of those things, you can't just do homes. I don't think. Now, having seen it. Not being rude to anyone that has done this, but it would have been really dull.
Yeah.
If it was just houses after houses after houses.
And I think, taking that point, what we really wanted to push early on to not just make it, because of course most developers start by delivering new homes. It's the bread and butter, if you like. But we had to bring community forwards really quickly. We were lucky enough that within the broader context of the scheme, the new train station was being formed in a wider sense with Network Rail and the West of England Combined Authority. So with those plans afoot, as it were, we had some really core ingredients for infrastructure early on in the project. And I'll tell you, one of the most boring bits in the middle that's actually amazing was opening a road. Sounds ridiculous, but for us, it opened up hundreds of acres of developable parcels and made it a reality that you can now drive, roughly a mile right through the heart of the site. On either side, you've got all these amazing projects now live, happening and coming out of the ground. But the key important piece for us from the outset was, what else can people do at Brabazon rather than just live there initially? So over quite a period of time, one of the assets, and you alluded to it at the start, is about regeneration and refurbishing. And we had a beautiful Grade 2 listed hangar, the old Hangar 16U, that's now the Spitfire hangar, that we opened in January. And what that's done is bring community facilities right at the start at Brabazon. It's helped grow a community, both internally to the scheme and externally. And it brought simple things to life, like a Makoko, a coffee, bakery, just great experiences, along with conference space availability. Businesses now come to Brabazon. You don't have to go to just a local hotel and a conference room. There's lots of businesses coming to just house their general meetings, their training, all sorts of things that then starts to bring both, if you like, the daytime and the nighttime economy to life early on. As we build and we take some risk in delivering our first offices, with businesses being here from the outset and just having something to do at Brabazon, even if that's just to hold a meeting, they can start to see the opportunity that's coming to life. And then to top that up, we start building meanwhile use facilities, so paddle, pickleball, sport, bring leisure, bring food, bring beverage. So all those things are happening as we speak now, and in the main we'll start to open facilities in 2026 before Christmas, and people will just have so much more to do here. And that was a real focus for us, I think, from day one to get right. Otherwise, it could have become stale quite quickly.
And I think that's obvious, having visited yesterday. And I think it's very rare that actually developers take that focus of saying, actually, let's start with community and build out from there. Often it's, let's build the houses and then the community will come after. And I think going there yesterday, going to that hangar, which is amazing, amazing redevelopment, it feels like it's been there for years and years and years and years, because it's a vibrant centre of the community. And everyone is using it for all those reasons that you just said, John. I just think it's what you set out to achieve, bearing in mind you're still really early in this project and there's still a lot to do. You've already achieved that, and looking at what you are developing and what's coming next is, like you say, there's so much more even still to come, that it's going to be a fantastic community. And I think you get that sense the minute you arrive there.
It's funny, we consciously, despite the fact that we've got 400 acres, there's effectively 4 access points onto the site, which isn't very much. So our first phase is off one of those access points, and we decided deliberately to name that first phase as a first impression place. And it sounds like a silly name or whatever, but it kind of gave us the focus to say, this has to be a place that you arrive and it feels established. It feels, like it's been here, since the aviation history, or talks to the past as well as the future. So massive investment in the landscaping, stock bricks, what are streets for? We decided streets are for people, not for cars. That also feeds into that whole narrative of a higher density place to live. And going back to what you were saying, and I'm going to correct you actually, we got 6,500 homes consented, but it will be 10,000 plus because we're part of that New Towns programme. Minimum is 10,000. But as you say, you don't start getting to those scales really beyond 3,500 homes on that site. It has to be all the other things that sit behind 10,000 homes, because that's what allows us to sell 10,000 homes, is the shops, the bakeries, all those other things.
And when did the first people move into the residential?
2021 was springtime, I think it was, of 2021. It was quite a risk. We started to build and started to build before COVID, way back when, and then we launched the site during COVID. And I think we were, truth be told, we were lucky. You take a gamble, don't you? Because people are only just coming back out of their homes at that point in time, and it was like January, February 2020, I think, and it just took off very quickly, and we got a really good initial response because it was different, because it wasn't traditional housing, if you like, that you'd see in various other parts of the country. We took some risk with just building something unique, higher floor to ceiling heights, making people feel like they've got more space within their home, having dedicated places to work, giving them a specification that is as standard, something that's really quite aspiring, so you want to be there. And that did pay off for us in those early years. And it took some time, and we made some mistakes, and we will continue to make mistakes, no doubt. It's such a large project, but what that enables us to do is learn as well, phase by phase by phase. If we haven't got something quite right, we can refine it next time around. How can we improve on that time and time and time again, until hopefully in a couple of years' time you've really nailed every single component that you were trying to achieve for that particular part of the project.
We'll never nail it. It's always changing, isn't it? I mean, and that's what I love about property as well. You know, you think you're going in one direction, and then, build cost inflation or something, or, sales price. We've developed a new product now, haven't we? Yeah. So people who bought in our first phase, if they were trying to buy in our second phases now, wouldn't be able to afford it, because the actual values have outstripped, as John was saying, far beyond what we'd anticipated. So you're always sort of adjusting. And I think one of the beauties about our shareholder and how we're funded, going back to sort of one of the questions that you're asked about, is this a blueprint? whilst we're called YTL Developments, like the truth is it's probably a better description to call us YTL Investments, because everything that we do, we are building and creating value for our next phase, and that's how we look at it. Whereas, you know, by the nature of development and how it's structured in the UK at the moment particularly, is most developers are looking at a 4-acre parcel somewhere and they've got to sell it and exit it at that moment. So their value and their interest is only up to that point, and then they're leaving. Whereas for us, driving through that first impression place, that first phase, to phase 8, people are going to be looking at that and going, that looks amazing. Or if we didn't do a good job, that looks terrible. Do we want to live here? So we're just constantly incentivized to do things better and refine, which is just totally different to, and, you know, big scale developments quite often, you know, house builders, because they're chasing IRR, etc., will divide up a site into different developers to sort of bring it up. Whereas, again, we aren't doing that. You know, everything we're bringing forward ourselves. You know, that might change at some point, but creating that value is critical.
But there's a cohesiveness to it, I think. Like you said, if you go to other developments, quite often you've got the different house builders and the style all looks different and their landscaping looks different, and you know, the road signs might even look different and the play areas look different. But it struck me that everything felt cohesive. I kept talking about the landscaping because it felt really established, but, you know, obviously that wasn't the case potentially 4 or 5 years ago. But the houses, the roads, you know, the parks, everything has kind of grown into what it's become. And there's some really unusual things like the kind of under building sort of garages. You know, the cars are there, but they're hidden. They're not on the streets. And, you know, there was a little area that we went to that was completely landscaped that you could imagine kids playing out as well. And do you think it makes a difference that you have kind of stewardship over the whole thing?
Definitely.
You know, and from a branding point of view, you know, there's Brabazon everywhere. Not in a, I don't know, not in a forced way really, but I think it just kind of says it's cohesive.
I think it's in a proud way. I think
Yeah.
we were talking about this yesterday. I think the fact that, you know, you've got Brabazon on just really kind of like subtly on your benches and stuff. It just there's a proudness of actually this is Brabazon and we're proud to be Brabazon and we're proud for you to be here. And I think that is really lovely.
There's a generosity, I think, to that as well. You know, and you know there was a really lovely element of somebody's back garden with a really nice brick detail in the garden wall. Well, clearly it would have been easier just to build, you know, a normal brick wall, but you haven't. You know, you said about the heights of the ceilings in the homes to buy. You know, that's something I've not seen anywhere else. You didn't have to do that.
I was going to say, actually, I think we should reference the fact that when you say that the ceiling heights are a bit higher, they aren't just slightly higher.
Yeah.
You know, it is, and it makes a massive difference. And I think that goes to stay in the PBSA that you've built as well. Like you instantly get in, then you go, it's different because you've got the ceiling height, you've got that element of space, that feel of space that you don't often get in buildings nowadays. And I think what you were saying, Seb, about kind of that learning process, that was music to my ears because I think we don't hear that very often. We hear, actually, the market sells this, the spreadsheet says this, we're going to build this because that's what we're told to build, and we don't need to learn because we've already learned. And actually this idea that you're continually learning and developing and bettering and making is what building should be about. And it so very rarely is, I find.
And we get this sort of upward, downward pressure from above, from Kuala Lumpur, KL. So we're a family, if you like, run business in many ways. So they look at it from an international lens. So like the double height spaces, for example, you're absolutely right. You know, you just wouldn't sort of expect someone who's building at scale to be delivering those sorts of spaces. And the truth is, we probably wouldn't have defaulted to that. But our Malaysian shareholders, where the market is totally different over there, you know, houses are much bigger, they don't have the same pressures, live in these spaces and say, but the value that they bring, the light that it, you know, floods into the home. And they're willing, and again, because they don't have to go to a bank and say, you know, dear bank, I've got this wacky idea, it's this double height space, and I'm going to build the houses a little bit bigger than the guys over the road because we think actually there really is a market. They can just go, that's what I want to do, guys. It brings in these sort of totally unique new sort of dimensions to the product that we deliver, which is probably why it does feel so different to a lot of the other things. They don't have this Malaysian sort of hand of God almost coming over and sort of moving some of these things for us as well.
It's challenging you, isn't it, to do something different? I mean, I bought a new build house 15 years ago that I lived in for maybe 3 years, and I guarantee you that house type is still being sold today with no modifications whatsoever, despite the fact that residents have changed, customers have changed, lifestyles have changed, a lot. Therefore, homes should as well. On the subject of homes, what makes Brabazon particularly interesting is the mix of living sectors, in one neighbourhood. And we discussed this a lot on the podcast, and we don't know why we don't see more of it. But as we saw on the tour yesterday, you've got PBSA, you're going to have build to rent, build to sell. They've obviously been viewed separately for most developers. I guess what is the thought process behind that kind of mixed tenure development? Why are we not seeing it elsewhere? Really, is it as easy as you made it seem?
I think no is the absolute truth in most places, but because we've got the land to do it, it enables us to bring different sectors forwards at any one time. And part of that is about risk. As we know, the market shifts, moves. One day PBSA is the flavour of the month. The next it's open market homes, then more affordable. So you've got these constant pressures, haven't you? Build to rent coming to fruition, co-living. What we can do, and it helps us to, frankly, diminish some risk, is bring some of those sectors forwards at the same time, at the right quantum. And that enables us, I think, to grow the community quicker. And it also means that something that we're really passionate about is having this sort of, life cycle community. So you've got families with young kids, you've got your students who will form a key part of the growth opportunities and jobs going forwards into your professionals. We're surrounded by industry, an industry that's really sought after. So that enables us to bring lots of different residential products forwards. One, to make sure that people can afford various products, because some people choose to rent and they wouldn't buy a home. Others want something really high end. Others want to buy their first flat. So we have to be able to provide everything there. And we might not do that all at once, but it does mean that we can overlap those different strategies. And it helps us as a developer, I think, to keep being nimble and keep moving forwards, even through challenging times in the market.
I guess that's about community as well, because if you create one type of home that's going to attract one type of resident, it's transient. They'll move out. I know, John, you were talking to us about some lovely stories about some people that have made great relationships with their neighbours that that already live there. Well, if there was nowhere else for them once their family have grown, to move out, then they'd leave Brabazon, and then they'd leave that community, and you'd be constantly having to, I guess, kind of restructure a community, which would be, what's above and beyond the role of a developer. But I imagine you would feel like you have to, because that's kind of the heart of the community. But if you can keep people there longer.
Mm-hmm. And you've got to therefore give them reasons to visit.
Yeah.
Whilst you can build different home types and different sectors or asset classes, you've also got to give them plenty of reasons to visit and keep coming back. And I think that's one of the key buying decision-making points, is that the people, they buy into the, if you like, that ambitious vision that we've got. And year on year, we layer that with different opportunity, more amenity, more spaces, green spaces, parks, ponds, lakes, shops, cafes, bars, restaurants, and then the arena. That'll continue for 20 years. So you'll always see something new coming to Brabazon, and then something changing as well. Within 10 years' time, no doubt, certain things that are here today might have moved on and might change. And that's just quite an exciting opportunity, I think.
I think, just to add one point as well, the other component of this is time, of course, and it's a huge site. And if we aren't selling to every aspect of the market, whether that is first-time buyers to retirement village, I think the only thing that we probably don't have on Brabazon is a cemetery. And we're fine with that, aren't we, John? That's okay. But if we're just selling to one particular market, then it's going to, John and I are going to be wandering around in our walking sticks, and only half of it's going to be built. So we also, and our shareholder is very clear, that we need to make this place quickly. And again, I go back to that investment point. The sooner we make a place, and it feels like a place that is vibrant and has all of these things, the faster the return back to us as investor is, because you're selling those units at a higher pound per square foot, and you're selling across all of these different markets. So you can only do that when you've got total control over that land, which again is quite a unique position for us.
And even you talked about kind of the schools being built there as well, and the station. They're sticky things, aren't they? Once you're there and they work and they're convenient and they're good quality, etc., then people will find it harder to move elsewhere. Really, when they've got all of that on their doorstep, it's going to be very hard to kind of replicate that. I think one of the first conversations we had, John, you were kind of talking about the city centre, Bristol city centre, and it's very difficult for people to kind of upgrade or upscale their living experience in a historical city centre, really. So at some point people move out, but with Brabazon you can move out, but with all of that kind of convenience, really.
It's about being able to do all of that, have those experiences and convenience when you can walk to it. And there's plenty of examples across the world in cities whereby that's quite challenging, and you've got to use various modes of transport to get to different parts of a city, because they might be a little bit fragmented. What we've got the ability to do is create those, if you like, the various hearts of this place, and make it really easy for people to get around, and make it really sticky, and give people good reasons to choose to come here, rather than it being almost forced upon you.
And I think that's the thing, that Cribbs Causeway, it's near Cribbs Causeway, which has always been a part of Bristol, and it's always been seen as a part of Bristol, but it's a place that you go to do your shopping largely in a car, because it probably wasn't that easy to get to in a bus, and then you'd leave again. Whereas actually with Brabazon there, I think it is, you could go to that area and spend the day up there and do lots of things, and you can do it by public transport quite easily once the train station's open. And I think that is opening up a whole new world to Bristol, which has always been part of Bristol, but is something, let's drive to it, shop, leave again. Whereas actually now it becomes somewhere where you can go and spend the day and become a destination, which I think is exactly what Bristol needed in many respects.
Yeah, what we've really trying to do is be the glue that knits all of those North Bristol leisure amenity spaces that have existed for a long time, and bring them all together, and give people that you now come here for a weekend. Don't just come here for a few hours and go to Cribbs, or just go to the zoo or the ice rink, the aerospace museum, the Wave, the inland surf lake that's just up the road from us. There's all these things that you can already come and do, but if we then make Brabazon the entertainment district for the region, and have plenty of things to do, that's what I think really creates a sticky place that people want to come to and choose to visit time and time again.
Yeah, you saying that, I'm like, God, yeah, weekend with the teenagers, that all sounds perfect.
And then add the arena into the mix.
Well, exactly. We haven't really spoken about the arena yet. Like, once that's up and running, it'll be
that little thing.
Exactly.
Which is huge. We just want to talk a little bit about PBSA. We obviously you're opening this September your first tranche of PBSA rooms, which is super exciting, and we had a great walk around on site yesterday. It's quite unusual to build PBSA without an existing neighbourhood. Let's say it's very different to opening in an established city centre or on a campus. What opportunities and challenges does that create?
Creates plenty of challenges, but also with that plenty of opportunities, in that, as you know very well, being sort of specialists in this sector, that most new build PBSA gets built in the heart of a city, and relatively close to one of the universities. And whilst we're only a mile and a half away, roughly speaking, to UE, there's very, very little, if anything, that is purpose-built in the north of Bristol. The great thing, and the opportunity, that one of the key opportunities that we've had, is that the Metro bus runs directly to UE through Brabazon now. So you can get to UE in 10 minutes. So really important was the infrastructure, for starters. The opportunity, as we saw it, I guess, was everything's in central Bristol right now. We can offer something that's totally different, and not just offer a building for students, but we can offer them job opportunities. If you think of how many jobs the arena will create in the next couple of years, students can come here and have an amazing time. Same for the engineering and those that are all around us, in the Airbuses, the GKNs, the Rolls Royces that surround us, doing their apprenticeships. There will be opportunities at Brabazon from an engineering, from a construction perspective. So the whole student experience for us is much more than just a PBSA building. It's about what else can we offer those students so that they have a great 3, 4, 5 years, however long their courses are, and give them more opportunities whilst they're in uni to then succeed once they leave.
And of course, like the train station, I mean, there's a new £500 million University of Bristol campus, which is directly connected, basically, almost from the PBSA. You fall out of bed, you're into that brand new campus, which is basically attached to Templemead Station. So that's a 15-20 minute train journey. So whilst it's sort of geographically, you might say it's detached, it kind of isn't. And, going back to what John was saying about the history of sort of cities and how they develop, if you're based in Clifton and your campus is at that new £500 million campus, it will definitely take you longer to get there than it will from Brabazon. Mm-hmm. And then you look at UE as well, and as John was saying about the MAL, a lot of UE students, I'm sure many University of Bristol students as well, work in the MAL at the moment. So why wouldn't you want to be sort of equidistance, 5 minutes walk from the MAL, what is it, probably a 10-minute electric scooter from Brabazon to UE? Is it in the middle of nowhere? I don't think it is. And then you've got all that industry and those opportunities that John was mentioning. And we work really closely, don't we, with industry. Mm-hmm. And again, that's a massive part of the story of Brabazon, is facilitating that growth. There's a huge amount of money that's just been announced to go into defence, and we sit around, the aerospace industry, the defence industry. So the growing area of Bristol is where we are. Actually, around Brabazon is the GVA per hour, the most productive area of the UK outside London. And if it was a London suburb, it would be the 6th most productive. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's huge. Yeah. And actually, that goes back to what I was saying right at the start, which is what Brabazon or North Bristol's never had, is the centre bit. It's got all those other bits. So I don't really see it in the sort of isolated way. I see it already incredibly well connected for their onward journey into industry, and it's better than anywhere else, I would say, for that purpose.
But that kind of speaks to what you're saying before about kind of learning and evolving, because the numbers of students that are now having to work and choose to work, and I think students working whilst they're studying is a great thing, and I don't know why everyone keeps talking about it being a terrible endeavour that students have to work while they're at university. But that is quite different now than maybe if you were considering, building something 5 years ago. You'd never really thought, well, how do I make it easy for students to work whilst they're living at university? But like you said, you've got all of these opportunities on the doorstep, but also the leisure facilities as well. You said it's not isolated. I mean, we saw the paddle courts and the pickleball kind of structures going up, and I think you said, wow, that's gone up in a week. It wasn't even there. So by the time the students move in, and throughout their year and their second year, there's going to be so much more for them to do. Learn, work, but also it's not isolated. People already live there. You're not dropping hundreds of students into something that's not already a vibrant community. And I think that lends itself to opportunities to mix and learn. The community centre, you were talking about all the different groups that are that going on
tons of
on there
regular
as well.
At the Zumba sessions.
I can imagine
it, as you can tell.
I teach the Zumba.
I think going back to the comparison with London, though, I think in London students live all across the city and commute in by various means. And I think we've kind of got to a point where we think that's only done in London, it's not done anywhere else. And I think your point exactly, being an ex-Bristolian, I totally know that if you are kind of living in Clifton and studying down at Temple Meads, it is going to be longer than jumping on that train. So when you're talking about convenience, actually, Brabazon does make it much more convenient than actually living in the city centre, because as a Bristolian, when you're in the city centre, you just walk everywhere because it's easier than trying to use public transport.
Yeah, so, true. And we've gone sort of not gone out of our way, but one of the pieces of work that we did quite early on when researching into PBSA and how we could forge our way into that sector specifically was around collaboration with universities and higher education and further education sectors. So we have we've opened up various collaboration projects across the universities, be that with societies, be that with academia, because we think that really is an added value piece, that because we have the time here, we can forge those long-term partnerships with both education providers, employers, and bring it all together so that the student has a better offer.
I mean, the one other thing, just seeing as we're talking about, students working and their next stages as well once they finish university. Again, the benefit we have with Brabazon and sort of linking it back to our commercial endeavours with our 2 offices being built at the moment, we're speaking with a potentially major occupier, and one of their biggest challenges is attracting the next generation of talent. How is my business more competitive than another business in securing that next generation of talent? Because we're bringing all of these various different sectors, asset classes forward, what we've been able to say is, well, we can ring fence. If you offer someone a job, for example, they've just finished their engineering course at UE, or actually better still, they've just finished their engineering course at Sheffield. So they've decided that they've taken a job with you, you're based in Bristol. If your office is in Bristol, we can give them a soft landing on where they live. So we can ring fence, BTR accommodation. If they tell us they need, 10 rooms, 15, whatever it is, we can ring fence those for those students. So the stress for the student isn't going, right, okay, I've now got this job in this new city, I don't know. Am I going to be able to live with like-minded people? Am I going to be able to afford to live where I work? Is that going to be a horror show? They can they can offer those 2 things in one go. And I've been amazed how many occupiers, when I've said, look, we can do this, we're building all of these different, just let us know. They've seen that as such a USP because it's such a competitive market. And as, digital technology sort of races forward, there is a real sort of arms race for the best talent to sort of, grow your own company. So that's been really interesting, which again, you just wouldn't be able to do anywhere else in the country unless it was of a massive scale like Brabazon.
I think you've touched on my next question there, which was kind of what would success look like if we were sat here in 20 years' time, really? What else can you see into the future for Brabazon in another 20 years' time?
I mean, success for me is definitely people just identifying Brabazon in the same way as they identify various other sort of districts within Bristol, whether that's Clifton, Bishopston, Redland, Brabazon. And, how that happens is by us bringing all of those other things, and like I said earlier, it's funny, the new town status and the government having to sort of simplify messages by saying, well, a new town is 10,000 homes. And in my mind, a new town is 10,000 homes by virtue of all of these other things that you've delivered. We're on that journey. So I kind of, I can see that in many ways. So that's almost my trajectory, this is how I think we're going to land. What does kind of exceptional look like? I suppose I would have to, being the sort of developer that I am, or long-term investor, if we are exceeding, city centre rents and people are sort of identifying us as a city centre at that moment in time, I'll feel like our job, we would have delivered on what our promise was.
For me, I think I'd sort of really simplify it. I'd like to just sit in the park in about 10 years' time and just sit there for an hour and look around and just see people enjoying themselves going into the arena or having come out from an amazing gig. Kids playing and loving the parks that we've created and the play spaces, the playgrounds, the various businesses, the shops, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, all those sort of ingredients, the pharmacy doing well, and life just becoming the norm, as it were. So, yeah, I guess we've got an early story now, and it'd be great if in 10 or 15 years' time we've been able to capture lots of those different stories that have happened over that duration of time, and documented them almost, to see that it's not about a part of what we've done and we've delivered has then had an impact on people's lives that are in a positive way, that are then living or visiting or working there.
It is true, isn't it? That I don't know if this, but there are two. I see there are 2 types of people that get into property. There are people that see property as a vehicle for making money, And then there are people who get into property because of the legacy that property has, and exactly as you just described. And I think people who tend to work for us as a business are the people that are working for YTL and Brabazon because of that vision, because of that real desire to make people's lives better. That is a driving force. And then it's almost, and our shareholders' view is that, and then the other stuff happens naturally. Do you know what I mean? The rest comes. And it's interesting sort of being guided by that philosophy rather than a sort of, margin or an IRR or, like you were saying right at the start, everything's just getting squeezed to sort of get an appraisal to work rather than looking beyond.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. I think that I can imagine you there, John, in 20 years' time, sitting in the middle of that going, I did that, and actually having that stamp on that legacy to have influence on that, I think is wonderful. And I do think that actually, at the end of the day, business is about keeping your customers happy. If you've got customers happy, then it's going to work. You're going to get that ROI because that is the cycle of things, how they are. So I look forward to seeing you sitting there in 20 years' time and looking.
That was a precursor for him just getting a statue in the park. I saw that straight away as soon as he said it. A little bronze statue of John McDiarmid.
And you can choose wherever you want in Brabazon as well. Where would you choose your statue to be? There we go. There's my question.
Well, one, I wouldn't choose to have a statue because I think that's ridiculous.
You would.
Two,
I've thrown him off now.
If I was to have a statue somewhere, I reckon it'd be in a nice little quiet place in a corner, watching the
world go by.
I'd be in the middle of the lake with a massive fountain 100% shot out of me.
And final question, do you think Brabazon could become a blueprint for the UK's next generation of new towns?
I mean, I think we are very unusual with the sort of, as I keep saying, our sort of shareholders' benevolence around the vision and how they're going to do that, and very deep financial pockets, which means you don't have to be going back to bank. So I think from a sort of design delivery, what looks good, I would hope that would be true. I think we're going to have to change the way that we structure and fund infrastructure, and I don't just mean hard infrastructure, I mean the soft infrastructure, in a way that will facilitate other PLCs who are motivated in different ways to deliver those sorts of things. So I think there will need to be a structural change or intervention from government to make this a blueprint, and that isn't planned at the moment.
Yeah, I think my concern is that the blueprint could become quite underwhelming across that. When you look at some of the new towns of the past, it's a shame at times that they don't live up to the ambition they could have lived up to. We absolutely want to do the opposite to that. So could that mean it becomes a blueprint? Well, maybe it should if we get it and when we get it right. But will that mean it becomes the blueprint for others going forwards? I think poses a really much more deeper, challenging question. And it does go back to some of the points that Seb raised around how those towns are funded, how viability works. And clearly we've got to think about all those things. It isn't just a case of build it and they'll come for obvious reasons. But I think we might still remain quite unique. And there's a few other really good examples of that in the UK that, will quite unashamedly say we'll steal some of those great ideas and reuse them. So I think from a Brabazon perspective, we really have got a unique opportunity. And linking that back into the blueprint piece, I'd struggle to see if it actually became a blueprint in the UK because of all the other challenges that some of those other new towns will face.
And I think you're right in that everything should be about its own place and its own needs and its own requirements. So therefore having a blueprint for anything is kind of like, well, you can't just pick something up and put it somewhere else because it's got to be created organically. But thank you, Jonathan and Seb, for joining us. It was wonderful to have you here and talk us through it. If you are ever in Bristol, I do urge you to go up and see what's happening at Brabazon because we had an amazing day yesterday on a tour, and I think it's a wonderful day out and you can see all the wonderful things that's happening. So I urge all our listeners to go and do that. But it's been really fascinating to hear about how Brabazon is thinking not just about buildings, but about creating that entirely new place and a new part of Bristol City. And And I guess what struck us is that successful places aren't just designed, they're nurtured. And I think speaking to you both, you get a sense of that actually that is an ethos that runs throughout YTL, and actually this is our little baby and we want to create something that everyone can enjoy and grow and develop. And I think that comes across by talking to you and by visiting. So massive well done for that. And it kind of shows that community, infrastructure and stewardship all matter just as much as actually the architecture of what we're building. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to House, the Shared Living podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And we'll be back next week with a special episode focusing on co-living with Bart Sassim from Co-Living Ventures. Thanks for listening.